Welcome, Gemini, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 23rd of February for the Ascendant, the Sun, or the Moon. I'm going to share with you the big themes of the week. Then on screen, your event chart. I'm going to unpack that. That provides a backdrop energy for the whole 7 days. I'll then go through all the key influences frame by frame to give you a really clear picture in terms of your relationships, energy, money and career. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundel. A very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so now and help it to continue to thrive. So this is a week when your ruler Mercury goes retrograde, and Mercury is going to be going retrograde this year always in water signs. Now, if we think of your rulership is air, so very much about crisp communication, its rulership of Virgo is about precision and analysis. So in the sign of Pisces, where Mercury is detrimented, it's much more emotional, and therefore that takes the edge off that cool detachment that your ruler likes. So it's a big deal, and for you it occurs in the part of your chart to do with your interface with the wider world. So your career sector, or how people view you, perhaps in terms of your local community. But we also have on Tuesday a quarter moon in your zodiac sign, which provides a backdrop for the following 7 days. Quarter moons can be quite tricky, and this one suggests that your need to be individual could clash somewhat with what's expected of you, particularly if you work in a big organization or a much more rigid structure. Now, towards the end of the week, we are going to see two conjunctions which are incredibly influential in a positive way. But as we burst into this week, there is one aspect that could be quite challenging. It's a square between Mars and Uranus. So on the screen now, Gemini, is your event chart. There's your ruler Mercury, right at the top of your chart, so very prominent. But the Sun is the most northerly player in your chart, so that's the one nearest the MC. So the Sun's really asking you to be very self-assured and confident when it comes to your professional hopes, whether you have your own enterprise, whether you're applying for jobs, whether you're doing a presentation. But the energy of Mars will join this cluster on the 2nd of March, and the following 6 weeks, particularly once Mercury goes direct on the 20th of March, will give you a fabulous opportunity to be very self-assured, to raise your profile in a very dynamic and assertive way. But as we go into this week, Mars is going to be clashing with Uranus. Now, apart from those 4 months last year when Uranus sped into your sign, Uranus has been in that psychological 12th house ever since fall time, March 2019. And the 12th house can be the part of ourselves we're less conscious of, but it can also be the part of ourselves that we're a bit reluctant to look at, things like our fears and anxieties. And it's possible over these last 7 years that at times you have felt somewhat on edge. And as we go into this week, although the moon is forging a beautiful link with Venus and also with Jupiter, as the day ends on Monday, the moon comes into a conjunction with Uranus and squares off with Mars. So something could come to the surface later on Monday, and it may be something that you're a little bit tender around, because Mars in the 9th house is very much a freedom lover. But maybe your desire to assert your independence may conflict with someone else's perspective of you, observations about some of your ways of being, but particularly around your emotional responses. And I think all through this week, if there is something you've been feeling unsure of or unsettled around, the chances are that Mars will amplify that in that square with Uranus. However, on Tuesday, I mentioned there's a quarter moon. So what happens is the moon's going to move forwards into your sign and squares off with the sun, which will also have moved forwards to around 5 degrees. And the implication of that is that your need to be true to yourself, which is the moon in the first house, might not quite work so well if you do work in an environment which maybe it's a big organization, maybe it's quite structured, maybe it's quite traditional. If you're someone who's a bit more of a natural bohemian, that could come up this week. The expectation could be that if you want to make progress, you have to play by the rules that other people are setting, and that might feel uncomfortable. But I want to reassure you of something. Despite that quarter moon, despite that chaffing energy between Mars and Uranus, and despite Mercury going retrograde, when it comes to your finances, some kind of significant breakthrough is possible, and it could be right at the start of this week or conversely at the end. And it's because Venus, the planet of money, links with Jupiter, the planet of fortune, in the second house of everyday money as the week begins. The moon links at the very start of Monday very well with both of them, and the moon begins the week in the sign of money, Taurus. So that's encouraging. But just also know, as the week draws to a close, the retreating Mercury meets the advancing Venus. And Mercury can be about commerce. So although you may have to be very precise if you are having a meeting or you're pitching an idea or you're wanting to enthuse people with your ideas, the Mercury retrograde in Pisces suggests you're not subjective. It needs to be very clear-minded, which you have a talent for, but you may have to cut through the fog, which Mercury retrograde in Pisces can create. So a little bit of a mistiness. If you can be very clear, the sun is also going to apply to the North Node, and there may be a fated opportunity in terms of your work that comes due towards the end of this week. So when it comes to money and work, if you're prepared to play by the expectations other people have for you, there could be a significant breakthrough. But what about relationships? Well, if you did meet someone this week, it wouldn't be a complete surprise if it was actually in quite a formal setting, like a conference, maybe through your work, could be a colleague. Also, if you're in a relationship which is going well and you want to be with that person long term, but it's a pretty newish relationship, or certainly an evolving one, the combination of Venus and Mercury towards the end of this week and the Sun and North Node suggests things like perhaps deciding to move in, do a rental, buy a property, or even set the date for your wedding, because the 10th house can be very much about traditionality and also formalizing things. But when it comes to your energy, I think your energy can be a little bit on edge, to be honest. And if there's an awkward or tender subject circulating in your situation at the moment, that could be what just makes you feel quite unsettled. So if you can do some sort of gentle but stretching or walking exercises, Mars in Aquarius in the 9th house, very much about being quite vigorous. But because of that nervous energy of Uranus, if you can do something which just burns off a little bit of any frustration, I think that will be good. Now, we talked about your career, we talked about money, we talked about your relationship situation. We haven't talked about Saturn and Neptune newly after that conjunction in your 11th house. What's the implication of that? Well, particularly as they've joined up with Chiron, which has been in this area full-time since February 2019, and Mars is in contact with at the start of this week, could be a conversation you have with a friend or someone that you find to be friendly or encouraging, that gives you more insight into how you can shape your connection to a group, a network, but still retain your individual self, your agency, as they say these days. But if there are any weak links around friendships, or at work you're not quite sure about how much you're part of things, Saturn and Neptune can definitely offer food for thought. But I think this is a week which actually, despite that Mercury retrograde and that quarter moon, does offer some rich possibilities. But I feel if you are feeling a bit on edge, just do those exercises and just know that something could get amplified if it's irritating you just at the time when you may be able to actually gain greater recognition for a lot of hard work you've been putting in for a long time. Discover what March holds in store for you by clicking on your March deep dive video on the screen. Also on the second screen gives you the opportunity to join me at my new website. There's lots of exciting information. It's not generic like a lot of horoscope sites are. It's all written very much from the heart, and it would be great to have your company. And if you've yet to order your personal horoscope forecast and life roadmap combination at 50% off, if you get the Natal version, please apply Astro 26 at the checkout and you'll get that 50% off. If you'd like to understand your soul or karmic version, the draconic option, please add at the checkout Draco 26.